brand new to you content. Once again, brand new shows, never before interviews that we've recorded for you. This is our gift for you every holiday season. Thank you very much for helping to support progressive radio in the United States. We sure do appreciate it, especially in this age. Cliff Schechter, kind enough to join us. A reminder, Cliff's Edge YouTube page, his Patreon page. Subscribe, become a member, help him out. Great content. And if you're looking for something to do over the holidays, by all means, head over there. There are tons of great videos, occasionally one featuring me. That is over there.
We have a whole lot. I'd say there's at least 24 featuring you at this point.
Oh, it's the skim milk of podcasting.
Oh, I'll call it the beautiful rose of our station.
Oh, it's the Mayo Bowl. But you can go find that at Cliff Schechter. And Cliff is, frankly, he's a political mind that we all should be listening to. He is so brilliant, and follow him. And once again, the Patreon. Follow the Patreon. Sign up there. Please help out if you can. So let's talk about something. This is how I've been able to talk about politics and kind of get through this. Is that there's a reality coming into the MAGA people, and it's kind of fun to watch how stupid they have been. And it doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. It's going to hurt me. It's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt all of us. But to watch MAGA realize themselves they've been duped is somewhat enjoyable, because there is this just deniability. Well, they're not going to happen. I had a guy call on my radio show. We were talking about the post office, and if they privatize the post office, you're not going to have private mail delivery in rural America. That's just is not going to happen. It's cost ineffective to drive 10 miles down a road and deliver mail to 6 people. You're just not going to do that. You're going to get a post office 45, 50 miles away from you that you'll be able to get there, but you'll have to pay for that post office box. And
have fun driving there, however many times a week you need to.
And he called in and he said, I think they can make it to where they'll force some private business that they'll have to deliver mail. And said, then no one will buy it. You don't understand. This is the reason why the post office works, is because it's not designed to make a profit. It's designed to offer a service to the American people. And yeah, sometimes that loses money. But the reality is if you don't do this, no one else will.
See, that's what you do with basic services, right? And we all have to decide what those basic services are. If you believe everything is, you're socialist, and that's okay. That's a right to have that belief. I do not. I think, but I do think when it comes to healthcare, food, when it comes to our necessities, and I think that also includes mail, and I think that includes information, quite frankly, which is why even before Elon Musk came along, I was arguing that I thought Twitter should be a utility, and I don't think it should be in private ownership hands, or at least partially publicly owned, to make sure it is something of the public good. Because getting truthful information honestly can save or not save your life, unsave your life, as Twitter has proven. And so these folks who fall for this stuff, I mean, again, I want to be this guy. You live in a rural area, right? Have you been to one before? How's the Wi-Fi doing there? Exactly. How in parts of Appalachia when they don't have running water? How's that doing? I mean, yeah, privatize everything in poor, hard to get to areas. Brilliant idea. Just genius. You're really going to get all those things that you want there. I mean, these areas where people don't have to drive however long just to get to a school, because they're not putting a school right next to you. Sorry, it's not Little House on the Prairie anymore. They for these kinds of basic services, and they think somehow that mail is. I mean, and that's the thing. It's the ability for these people to delude themselves. I just did what I do at the beginning of my live streams, which, by the way, are on at 2 p.m. Eastern every day, folks, at Cliffs_Edge. What I do at the beginning of them is I do anywhere between a 7 and 12 minute. I mean, you can call it a rant. It's not always angry. There's some of them have been comic, some of them whatever, but a take on things. And I just did one. It was called FAFO, and I'm not allowed to say that on the air what that means. But the second part is find out. And the second letter is around. So you can try to figure it out from that. And I picked 3 groups. I wanted to be very diverse in who I chose. I picked white union voters who are complaining about the Nippon, that Trump is preventing the Nippon takeover right now. The steel workers who, I don't know. Trump didn't make it too obvious when he attacked unions constantly. The term he was in office, all of the billionaires he surrounds himself with that bust unions, constantly. The fact that he himself busted unions. I mean, sure, Smart idea. And the guy who had organized like steelworkers for Trump was the one complaining. Draw the tear on my face if you can in the videos of this. The thing is like, I'm done. I'm done pretending. I used to pretend I had empathy, and maybe I had a little bit. I have none now. You voted stupidly for yourself. You voted stupidly for our country. You voted to harm my family's life. You voted to take rights away from my wife. You voted to make my kids have to grow up and look at this person, this Jabba the Hutt Jabberwocky, snail like dragging slime behind him creature that rolls around golf courses and paints his face different colors and whatever and eats fries like they're going to run out tomorrow. That's what you chose to put in there. So my kids are going to have to look at that as their president. We're all going to have to be embarrassed. I have no sympathy. I also picked on, picked on. Yeah, I guess I did pick on them. They deserved it. Both Latinos and Latinos who voted for him, who are now, I see, and again, I want to be clear, not the entire group, just the ones that voted for him. The Latinos and Latinos who have family members deported or are deported, I will have so much sympathy. I'll stand at a wall to fight so they don't get deported. Yep. But the ones who voted for it, who I see saying things like, oh, well, I'm not a citizen, but I'm not a criminal. He won't send me out. Or I'm not a citizen, or I was worried about the economy. I wanted to bring down the price of whatever, which he just said, of course, he can't do. And we all knew he couldn't do. Yes. But I would, even though my son is undocumented, say goodbye to your son. And you know who I feel sorry for in that equation? Your son, not you. All the suffering you go through, good. I'm glad, actually. And I'm going to come out and say that. I'm not Christian. I don't care. I don't have to embrace turn the other cheek. I'm Leviticus. I'm like the Republicans who pretend they're Christian but aren't really. And I'll say quickly, I know we have to go. The third group was Muslims, not the 70% who voted to do the smart thing, but that 30% who voted for Trump. And now the people who are going to die because of you. Apparently, I care more about Muslims than you do because what he's going to do to the West Bank and in Lebanon, what Bibi's going to do. Yeah. So that's it. FAFO. That's all I got to say.
Well, and your points are great. And by the way, how many times did I talk to a Republican who said, well, the price of eggs and gas? And I said, what are the price of eggs and gas? And they're quoting me prices from 2021. So they're not even the current price. They're basically infatuated with the price of things that they were in the pandemic era. And they're basically in thinking that those are still the prices. You brought up the undocumented workers. There have been some, because I'm a little bit more up in farming country here, there have been some excellent articles that say, the dairy industry, 60 to 65% of the people that work in the dairy industry are undocumented workers. And all of a sudden, the Dairymen's Association, the Dairy Council, all these people that supported Trump, now all of a sudden wait a second here. Even if you don't raid their dairies, but you raid someone 100 miles away, they're already saying that's going to be 30% of their workforce gone because people are just going to leave. And they're realizing the mess that they've created. And
have fun going out of business. You voted for it.
I'm a Christian. I will say this. I feel sorry exactly like you. I feel sorry for the people that are being persecuted. I do not feel sorry for the people that are going to get hurt who voted for other people to suffer, and they were too stupid to realize that they were putting their own head on the chopping block. I have no. Yep. That's on you guys.
I'll feel sorry for the dairy farmer next to you who voted for Kamala Harris and ends up maybe losing his farm. And there was an interview with one. Do we have? We may be running out of time here, but
no, we got 6 minutes here. So
there's an interview with one. I don't remember if it was on CNN or CBS, but this huge dairy farmer in South Dakota, and the reporter is making the point that the obvious secret that nobody wants to talk about is at least half of the workers on these dairy farms are undocumented.
Yep.
And talk to the big genius who was like, well, they're not going to do it. And she's like, well, he said he's going to do it. Well, what do they want to do? Not eat? They want to not get food. And the whole thing is like, you're using logic and applying it to Trump. Is that what you're doing here? So you're thinking, because Donald Trump thinks that deeply, that he's going to say to himself, wow, it'll stop people from eating, people who, by the way, I couldn't care less about because I'm Donald Trump. So I'm not going to do that. I mean, that moron. As far as I'm concerned, and again, I don't care what people think of me for this. I hope he loses his farm. I mean, the only outcome to me better than that is that nothing happens and those undocumented workers are okay. But if they have to leave, I hope he loses his farm and I hope he loses his livelihood because he's an idiot. Donald Trump told him what he would do, and he chose to be like to lie to himself. And I'll say quickly, these folks are like, oh, oil prices, gas prices. Hi, stupids. Do you know who the people are where we get most of our oil? I know you see Saudi Arabia on TV a lot. So you probably think it's that, even though that's a small percentage. Do you know? It's a place called Canada. And we are now threatening all sorts of tariffs against them. Gee, I wonder if they're going to hit us with a tariff on something they know we need from them. Not to mention lumber. We get a lot of that from them. You want to have a house? Good luck. Good luck building a house and not having, gee, now the lumber price will go up and the price of workers, when undocumented workers are kicked off of construction sites, have fun paying 14 times as much for your house. Again, no sympathy. You voted for this guy. This is what you voted for. I hope you get the worst of everything in your life. That is honestly the way I feel, and I'm not hiding it anymore.
Well, and no, and you shouldn't. And this is to everyone out there. You shouldn't hide this. You shouldn't force yourself to go to a Thanksgiving meal with people that you don't like going to, that are just going to insult you and be mean to you. You don't deserve to surround yourself with people that are going to make you feel bad. You can set to yourselves like you are going to eat the meal you have made for yourself, and that's fine. You look at the dairy farmers, the processing plants, the farms, all of them are freaking out right now because all of a sudden
manufacturing. I mean,
exactly.
The CHIPS Act that, by the way, Joe Biden passed and most dumb Republicans voted against, why we brought in 800,000 manufacturing jobs. Gee, media, it would be nice if you talked about that at all, but I know Biden was old, so you had to talk about that. I mean, those manufacturing plants, who do you think's working in a lot of them? You know, they just put an Intel plant, up in the Columbus area, 2 hours north of here, because of the CHIPS bill. Well, guess what? Soon, that Intel plant will not have undocumented workers. And guess what? If Trump goes through with this, if he can organize his sock drawer enough and get himself out of bed in the morning without falling over, and you know what? When he does that, guess what happens in the end if they do push that? Well, the workforce will become what? 4 times as expensive. But I'm sure the CEOs, the good CEOs of this land, will make up for it by cutting their salaries. I'm sure they're not going to add it to the price of goods.
Exactly. Well, we're in Minnesota here, and I know Washington out there with Seattle gets this too. A good chunk of our state trade is with Canada, and this moron is picking a fight with, of all countries, Canada. It's like picking a fight with Luxembourg. Yet he's going to do this
exactly.
And it's interesting to see the Republicans.
Pretty nice banks there.
Oh yeah,
I'm just being silly.
Well, but it's we have snowmobiles.
It's where I may have to put some of my money if I have to run out of the country.
I've got an invite to stay up there. I love Toronto. It's a lovely town. But it's just all the Republicans are now freaking out. It's like, wait a second, we are, some of our biggest supporters are the snowmobile makers and the ice fishing manufacturers and stuff like this. And all of a sudden it's like, we're going to lose that market. Yeah, you idiots. What did you think was going to happen? So
I don't know what to say to them. I'm sorry.
Oh, you kind of cut out there a little bit.
You're
glitching a little bit. Yeah, glitching a little bit there. And Cliff, it's they made their bed. They've got to sleep in it, and yeah, they're acting like they're victims.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to rub it in. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to have Schadenfreude. That is what will keep me warm on a cold night. I mean, maybe a little tequila too, which I'll make sure to get from Mexico, a more democratic country than we are now. And their Supreme Court was busy making choice available to all women, while ours was busy taking it away. I'm just again. It's like you watch these older movies about Rome and Greece and republics that have failed, and it's always when corrupt, stupid people take over. And I'm not hoping the republic fails. I'm hoping we can come back from this. But they have chosen to undermine everything that this country stood for. Most importantly, the rule of law. People feeling like they get a fair shot. Whatever side anybody comes down on, the shooting of that United Healthcare worker, I kind of think that you don't murder people in the streets. It's a horrible thing to do. And I kind of also think you don't murder people by not giving them the care they've paid for. So I don't have sympathy for him either.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. I'll let you finish that thought. And then we're going to get into something that has nothing to do with politics. Okay. Cliff Jackson, kind enough to join us. We'll take a break. Come on back. It's the Matt McNeil Show. Cliff, I want to wrap up what we were talking about at the end of that last segment is, you're right. I mean, we are living in a really weird world. You don't gun people down in the street. But we also have a healthcare industry which makes $23 billion in profit in a year. And part of that profit model is denying people the healthcare they need to save their lives. it is a really hard world, and that is just a reality. And it's easy to disconnect, but at the same time, this is where we're at.
Well, I feel sorry for the family of the guy who was shot, but I also feel sorry for the family of this promising young man who, became radicalized because of the massive pain he was in. And again, he's a murderer, so I'm not saying him, but his family. And I also feel sorry for, and I know some of these families, however many families out there who've been in situations where they've desperately needed the health care they paid for, and oops, suddenly they don't get it. If these healthcare companies hadn't fought against a reasonable, reliable, public option or a Medicare for all so that people could choose that, then private health insurers could still exist, because we'd have this thing that capitalists are supposed to believe in called competition. And they wouldn't be able to pay their CEOs huge amounts of money. And they wouldn't be able to waste money on ridiculous amounts of paperwork and all the other stupid things that they do. They would have to be more efficient because they'd be competing with the government entity that didn't have any of those issues. And then we would get better healthcare and these companies would still make a ton of money. But they've chosen to block that all along the way and try to stop us and make Obamacare obviously the only thing, allow some regulation. They've even tried to undermine that. So, they should look back. All these folks should look back to when President McKinley was assassinated by an anarchist, and some of the things that were going on in the late 19th and early 20th century with bombs going off on Wall Street, because they think this is unique. And if Trump exacerbates our current worst in the history of this country, economic issues in terms of the wealth disparity between the rich and the poor, wait. Because as you anger people more, whether I think it's right or wrong, I'm not going to attack anybody. But if you think people aren't going to resort to that when their family members are rejected from healthcare, or when their lungs are poisoned by fossil fuels or other things, good luck.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoy your helicopters and your private compounds, because you're not going to be able to walk the streets if that's what you want.
And your history lesson about the late 19th, early 20th century is spot on there. All right, so we're going to get away from politics right now. And I want to get into something with music, but I want to get into something that, all right, so Timothy Chalamet has been coming into Minneapolis and in Minnesota. And
you've been partying with him?
Well, it's I wish.
I'm going to guess it's a Dylan kind of thing?
Yes, it is. It is, of course, the Dylan movie, A Complete Unknown, is coming on out. Apparently, this dude started like 4 years ago, back when he was on Dune, preparing for this role. I mean, he's really kind of worked into it. It sounds like it's good reviews. First of all, he's come into town. I don't think a state could love an actor more than they love Timothy Chalamet right now, because he went out there, went to the University of Minnesota, did some stuff out there, was out meeting and greeting, talked about how much he loved the town. Everyone's a gaga for him. And now next to Prince, there's Dylan, and, an iconic figure. Although, Dylan really came to fruition in New York and as the real juggernaut that he became. The truth is that I'm glad that he's.
So did Al Franken, but he also was, he still was from Minneapolis.
He was from Dylan was from the Iron Range. He's up in northern Minnesota.
Was he? Yeah, I just know that when I was there, I saw the big,
the mural that we have from the Brazilian artist. Yeah, that's great.
I wish I had more time to look at all of the places. I think you drove me around to near where Prince, his house was, but I just couldn't see everything because I think I was there for about 48 or 72 hours. But yeah, some great music. I mean, it's amazing how much great music comes out of your area.
Well, and Dylan is such when you do a Highway 61 revisited, that was the old highway that ran up to northern Minnesota. I mean, that's Hibbing. Talk about Dylan, because I think that as we get into these discussions, especially with, I think, people that like pop music more, and the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Dylan came on out and was so important in the development of the music scene, and just, was so, some of his lyrics, he won the Pulitzer Prize, I believe, for some of his lyrics, and the Nobel Prize, I think, as well. Yeah. So, it's just, you look at what he has done. He truly was a kind of a great figure, but to a lot of people, I think, a little bit of a lost figure.
Yeah. Listen, what I found, again, I'm a writer, and I've written everything from a book to ads to columns to this, to poetry and songs and whatever. And I can't help but when there's somebody that is such a lyrical genius, I appreciate that on a level, a whole different level. And I find very few, reach that level of where you're just like, wow. Some of them are bands you haven't even heard of that I've gotten to know because their lyrics are brilliant. Some of them, I think on when we were going out to commercial earlier, you know, you played Born to Run. I mean, Bruce Springsteen, I think, is one of the, as a lyricist, is incredible too.
Unbelievable.
You know, what he's written. Billy Joel goes in there somewhere. And I think, you know, you can think of I think Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam. I mean, some of those lyrics are incredible. So, you know, Dylan's kind of music was, I mean, it's catchy, it's great. You know, it doesn't have the rock and roll edge that I'd say is what a lot of my favorite like rock and roll is. But I love Dylan anyhow, because I love him because, again, there's you can argue, try to make the argument that there's been maybe somebody is good, and you can never make the argument that there's ever been anybody better. I don't think there's ever been, at least that I am aware of, and I'm not claiming to be like, you know, a PhD in the history of music, but in all sort of, you know, if you want to talk about music since sort of the 50s, 60s, when we started having kind of pop and rock and roll and that kind of thing, I can't think of a better lyricist. And it just, you know, what he means to Minneapolis is in that area, even if he's not from specifically Minneapolis, is amazing. Seeing that huge mural up there and people talking about it. But I also want to tell you, I went out to this great breakfast place when I was there that happened to be right next to a place called Marcy's Playground. And when I saw that, I'm like, the great Marcy's Playground. So don't you take away from Marcy's Playground, all right? They're from there too. And I figured it out because Marcy's Playground was right next to me. I know where they got their name now.
You're sitting across the street from there. No,
you guys are for music what we are to acting. It's kind of funny, right? I mean, Cincinnati, we don't have all these great bands you've heard of. We just have Sarah Jessica Parker, Clooney, you know, like people like that. So,
Blood on the Tracks, still amazing. I mean, I still listen to that. And I get something out of it every time I listen to it. All right, Cliff Schechter. Cliff's Edge is the YouTube page. Subscribe. Join 100K, man. It's the way you got to do it. Also, the Patreon page. Help support him. Cliff, happy holidays as well. Thank you very much for joining us for a brand new to you show. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and we'll get through this together, my friend.
We will. I'll tell people quickly that the Patreon is patreon.com/Cliffs_Edge2. If you want to go there, I'm going to be putting up a lot of extra content there, lots of extra videos, lots of extra posts. My writing is going to mostly be there. So thank you for having me. Happy holidays, everybody. We'll get
Thanks, Cliff.